Hi everyone, this is Prashha here, and welcome to the Prashha Dutra show. I am so excited to connect with Anna today and bring you a really great conversation, something that has been going on in my WhatsApp chats for a long time now. Now we get to share it with you. So I met Anna through LinkedIn and through a few connections last year and got to see her in person in Toronto. And she does some incredible work. She has a following of more than 300,000 people on across her social media channels. She has guided thousands of professionals to discover and land high paying jobs. She has been a two-time LinkedIn learning instructor, and she has coached people across 35 countries. I think I can go on and on and on about her accomplishments and the impact that she's having and the mission that she's on to help 1 million professionals. And with this conversation, we just get to bring you, piece of her wisdom and also some incredibly interesting angles to job search and what job search is all about. So I'm really, really excited to bring Anna here and we will get started. But yes, thank you so much again for being here. We just bring Anna on. Okay, 1 second. Oh, hi.
Hello. Oh my goodness. Thank you for this amazing introduction. I was blushing the whole time. I am so excited to be here.
Yeah, this is amazing. I know, like, it's just almost like our personal chat, right? Like, we're just like, oh, let's just do it live and bring everyone along. So I love this, Anna. So tell us, how did you get into this field? Like, where did it all begin?
Ooh, this is such a good question. Well, it really began over a decade ago when I was a struggling job seeker after I moved abroad. And I was looking around, and my friends were landing dream interviews, what seemed like with ease, or at least that's what it seemed like to me. And I was not. And I was really frustrated because I knew that I'm good. I knew that I could do it, but it felt like I just didn't know a secret that everyone knew. And it really took me a few years to learn how to job search, how to job search proactively, how to job search without applying for jobs. So I really went through this journey myself. And from there, I also went on to then figure out what the right career path for me is. And I switched careers a couple of times. So that really took me on a journey myself. And then with my latest career pivot, I got into recruitment sales. So I got into the recruitment industry. So for the first time, I was actually seeing from the inside out how employers hire and how they make hiring decisions. And then I also saw the candidates and I realized, wow, there are so many incredible candidates out there who are really stuck in jobs that they don't love, in jobs that are not bringing them the fulfillment and the money, the income that they deserve. And I realized, wow, it's because a lot of people are in the same position I was a decade ago, not knowing how to job search, not knowing how to sell themselves. So I kind of was on both sides of job search, going through it myself and struggling through it myself at first, and then being on the employer side. And that's when I realized, okay, there is so much that I want to share with job seekers to empower them, for them to see that they have, I always talk about this, a lot more power than they think they do in the job search process, and show them how they can land dream opportunities that they always thought were out of reach. And that's how I got into career coaching over 4 years ago now, 4.5 years ago. And it has been just such an incredible journey. We've had over 1,000 people in my courses and coaching program from 35 plus countries. And this, honestly, I was reflecting on this actually last night. This is something that makes me just so happy, just hearing from my clients, seeing their wins, and not just the job offers, but how they think differently about themselves, how they think differently about their career, the job search process, how they show up differently in the world. And that honestly just means everything to me. So
Yeah.
I can truly say that I'm right now in my dream career. So
Oh, I
that's
love
kind
it.
of is my journey.
Yeah, I love that. And yeah, as we chat every day, or like look at, even as audience members who look at your journey on LinkedIn or Instagram, they may not know where you come from and how personal this is to you and how much it has impacted your life. And that's why it's so important to you to like sort of give it forward as well. So thank you so much for sharing that. Now tell me about this in controversial thing going on LinkedIn. I am really excited to get into it, where you mentioned, and this was an aha moment for me too, but you mentioned that job search should be fun. So tell
Mhm.
me more about it. Where does this come from, with this wisdom, and also this different way of looking at something that is, that has been publicized and shared from a pain perspective, right? Like, and it is a pain
Mhm.
point, right? Like, if you're, I've helped people with months long job searches. Recently we had somebody in the program who was searching for 12, 13 months, and finally got it. But she wasn't working with me, but then when she started with us, the biggest issue was that mindset that we had to work on. And that's kind of what I want to deep dive into, because um, higher paying jobs are also high skill jobs, and high skill jobs tend to have like this connotation of like, I need to know all the technical stuff and I need to know all these things. And then it just sort of makes things much harder. So my question to you was, where did all of this come from, this really cool like take on job search? Like, it should be fun. Let's start there.
Ooh, this is so good. This was actually the topic of my latest podcast, the Career Diet podcast. And it's so funny. We post the podcast on all the usual platforms. And recently, I saw a couple of days ago, I saw some comments under the YouTube video of this podcast. And people are saying and commenting that, what are you talking about? This is complete nonsense. Job search sucks. And here is what I want for you to think about. Anything in life, if you think and say it sucks, it is going to suck. If you keep thinking, oh, this is so hard, no matter what we're talking about, there is no way it's going to feel fun and easy and enjoyable. That's just kind of the first thought here. And for me, where this whole idea came from was I see this a lot with job seekers, this idea of, ugh, like I have to job search. And this idea of like, this is really hard and difficult. And I was reflecting on my own journey. And I talked a little bit about it in the beginning that I have changed careers twice. I have moved abroad multiple times. I had to job search in a foreign language my entire career. I had to do all of that on my own. I didn't have any support from my family, my parents, my significant other. So I never had anyone to rely on. So when I say that there was challenge. It was challenging to job search and it was scary to job search. And a couple of times, actually, I walked away from a job to move to a new city, or I once walked away from a very toxic job without a plan. So I also know what it is like to job search when you don't have a job. So I'm not delusional when I say that, yes, job search does come with rejection. It does come with challenges that you will, no matter who you are, that you will face, and self-doubt that you will face. So I'm very much familiar with it. But when I look back at my own journey, every single time I was job searching, I actually liked it. I actually enjoyed the process. And I was trying to kind of dig a little bit deeper and understand for myself, okay, well, what made it enjoyable? And it was a few things, but number one was I was thinking about it as, wow, so much is now possible for me. Now that, let's say, I walked away from this toxic job, let's see, let's make it fun and exciting. Let's see where this new journey can take me. Or moving to a new city, moving to a new country. Is it scary? Absolutely. But also, how grateful I am and how lucky I am that I have this opportunity.
Yeah.
So really looking at it from the kind of the abundance mindset of, this is an option that I can explore these opportunities. So that was the major kind of mindset shift for me. And I think this also allowed me to grow in my career so quickly and get into, a six-figure career abroad before I was 30, because I wasn't afraid to walk away from a job. I wasn't afraid to say no to a job that was not right. Because again, I believed that it was okay to job search, that it wasn't scary, it wasn't hard. And that's really a lot that I talk with my clients about. How can you enjoy this process? How can you find joy in the journey? Because something else I learned that really changed my life, I'm not exaggerating, is that you're always working on something. So today it might be job search. Then tomorrow you land the job. What are you going to be working on? Well, maybe promotion, maybe starting a family, maybe meeting your significant other, whatever it is for you. But there's always something that we're chasing, right? There's always a goal that we're working towards. So if you're only focused on that end goal, that big goal, and because it's a big goal, it's not going to happen overnight. It probably is going to take you some time to get there. So if you're only just focused on that goal, you just don't feel good most of your life because you're not there yet. And you're always going to be figuring something out. So what if you look at your life as, well, my life is about figuring it out. Can I find joy in this process? So that's what I really tell myself every single day when I get wrapped into, my own thoughts and I start thinking, well, I'm not there yet. I ask myself, how can I enjoy the process over focusing on the destination?
Yeah. No, that's really important. And I think that's what people don't realize. And I think that one energy shift can result in so many great things, right? Like suddenly you're not desperate. Suddenly you are approaching it with that abundance mindset, like you said. And suddenly things start to happen because that's kind of how things happen. They don't happen how we thought they would happen. They happen in mysterious ways. And I feel like when we get so hung up on the negativity of it or even just the stress of it, then they happen much slower, and then we try to make them happen a certain way when all we need to do is just put in our best and forget the rest, right? Like it's like we have to let go of that. So it's a really great way to look at it. And I always tell my clients too, because my clients are looking for these really great jobs, and I'm like, isn't it amazing that you have risen above your ancestors to a point where you're demanding like $300,000? Like, do you even like, do you understand the gravity of the situation and how historical it is and how big deal it is for you to be one of the 3 million people in America? If you're from the Indian diaspora, only 3 million of us, and you're trying to go for like the biggest jobs that are out there, and why not look at it with all this gratitude that, oh, I made it, I get to go after it, I get to do this job search, I have
Yeah.
the opportunity, and I didn't get kicked out. I could make it all the way to this place where I can at least dream. Our ancestors couldn't dream of any of this, right? So I love that perspective, and I feel like it should stick with people, that even though it's hard, but you calling it hard is making it harder. So how is it helping, right?
I just love this reminder of, look at how far you've come. I personally grew up in a post-Soviet Union Russia. And when I talk to my 90-year-old grandma, she talks about walking to school at 11 years old, 20 kilometers one freaking way every single day in, the midst of crazy Russian winter. So that
Wow.
she can get education, and she is the first generation in her family to get education,
Mm.
finish high school and then go to university. So when we're here discussing six-figure roles, and we really do get to do it, because we do, even though sometimes it feels like we don't have options, we have a lot of options
Yeah.
compared to where really I think a lot of us came from. So we get to do this.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and I think anybody that I've seen over, like, if their job search has extended, let's say 6 months, and especially people who were laid off in the last couple of years, what I've noticed is that as soon as it gets to 6 months, 7 month, 8 month, at that point negativity is not an option, and they really flip at that's a tipping point where they're like, oh wait a minute, I can't afford to be negative anymore, I must choose this way, I must find the positivity. And then what happens is funny what you said about options, tons of options open. And the beauty of all of that is that now they're never afraid of job search. Now they're like constantly on the go, they're always interviewing. I have a client who had multiple layoffs, many things happened, and now she's always interviewing. She's like, I always have interviews, I could get a job anytime I want. And I'm like, and then she tells
This,
me, yeah,
this, I
I
can get a
can get a
job anytime I want. This is it. This is
yeah,
it. Because it's not, like, job search is not really about getting that one job.
yes,
It's about, and that's what I tell my clients, it's about learning those skills of, okay, how
yes,
do I actually do this? And getting your confidence and your mindset on that next level, which also comes with tools of, okay, how do I actually reframe that for myself so that you're set for the rest of your career? And it's not something you dread every single time. It's not something you're scared of. Oh my gosh, what if I get laid off tomorrow? Yeah, it
mm-hmm.
sucks, but okay, well, now that you got laid off, you have this, you were forced, you were pushed into thinking, okay, what is it that I actually want as my next step? Because most of us don't pause and think about it, right? We just go through the motions when we're not job searching,
Yeah,
when we're not
yeah,
forced to pause and think. So, this is honestly the biggest thing that you can do for yourself, as whether it is actually job search or anything else that you're working on in life. Let's say you're working on meeting your significant other. I compare this all the time, job search and dating. So
mm,
if you're dating, because I dated a lot in my 20s,
yeah.
looking for,
The right
my
person.
significant other. And if you go into it with the mindset of, "Oh, another first date, oh, I really don't want to do it. I just want to get there. I just want to find that person." Just imagine the energy that you put out in the world, the energy that you bring with yourself to that date,
Yeah,
i.e., to an interview,
interview, yeah, yeah,
versus, hey, let's see what's out there. Let's have a conversation. Let's see if we want to have another conversation, whether it's the second date or the second interview.
yeah,
Do I want this?
yes.
Okay. So that's
I love that. No, I love that. We could talk about this all day long because it's such an important part of job search. And I want to, like, I feel like what you touched on with the interviews, that's very, very important. I feel like we're approaching it with a lot of desperation. Sometimes you're approaching it with like they need to pass me, especially if you are insecure and low self-esteem. I feel like we want other people to accept us, and when we can't accept ourselves, and I feel like we're not even in the business of selling ourselves. Right, we're in the business of impressing people because that's kind of what we did, and that's kind of how we grew up. And it's like, who can I impress next? And then when we keep doing that, then we're not in the business of selling ourselves, and you will not survive this economy if you can't sell yourself. That's pretty much what it all comes down to. Now, if you come into an interview room expecting the interviewer to validate your insecurities, then that's going to go up really, really poorly, and there's this huge, like, nonverbal communication is like 90% of communication. it's
Mhm.
not it's not the 10% that comes out of your mouth. It's 90% of the energy, the body language, the tonality, like, again, your confidence, all of that is like such a big part of interviews. And I feel like everyone just wants to skip over it because it's so untangible. And like, I don't feel productive working on that, and just everyone wants to do exactly what everyone else is doing
Yeah.
and lose their leverage, and again, get out of the business of selling themselves. And it's like, okay, so then what the hell are you selling? Because even the interviewer is confused at this point. It's like, I'm not your therapist, I'm not going to make you feel better, just tell me why I should hire you and we can move on. And like you said, it's a two-way conversation. Like, it's, do you want to work for them? in
Mhm.
fact in fact you've worked in talent industry, you know this better than anyone else, is that they want you more, they need you more than you need them. No matter what market you're in.
This is something, if you've been at all at any point follow me and seen any of my content, this is something I just wouldn't shut up about. And that is, employers are desperate. They're desperately looking for what we used to call in recruitment star candidates. And by the
Mm-hmm.
way, anyone can become that star candidate, but employers are desperate to find talent. And if you've ever watched any interview of any CEO when they're asked, what's your number one challenge? Every single one of them says talent, people.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of my mission with what I do is for you as a job seeker feel like, whoa, they want me. They're looking for me. They're somewhere, there's an employer out there desperately looking and scratching their head, where can I find this person who has done this and this and that? And those are maybe very different things that you're thinking for yourself, well, this makes no sense.
Yeah.
My background makes no sense.
Yeah. And they need exactly that.
Mhm.
But that's the thing. I think people don't take enough time to figure out what they bring to the table. Like in my program, that's all we're doing in the first few weeks is like, what, show me the goods. Let's look at it. Then we can package it, right? And I feel like again, if you look at a lot of the advice around job search, is so much focus on the resume and this little tweak here and the little thing there. And it's like, but if you don't even know what you're selling, how are you going to sell it? And so I feel like sitting down with your journey and really figuring out what it is that you bring to the table and then matching it against what they're looking for is a better approach than trying to fit into that job description that everybody's putting out there. And you're like, oh, I have this but I don't have this, I have this but I don't have this. Oh no, hold on, what are all the things you have? And now let's see what fits into it, right? Like, so it's like you have to sort of start with you, build yourself, build your mindset, build what you bring to the table, and then go sell it, and then be that star candidate because you'll be able to understand that better in your own context.
And
Yeah.
something, speaking of selling yourself, something that I learned in recruitment that was a big aha moment. Because as a job seeker, especially living abroad, especially as someone with an accent, I used to think that that's what's stopping me.
Mm.
But I remember I got into the recruitment industry and I realized that, oh, there are, again, so many amazing candidates. And as someone who would present those candidates to an employer, I would
Mm.
think, huh, this person is a no brainer choice. They have, they're coming from a direct competitor. They've done the exact job. This is going to be an easy hire. My
Mm.
job here is done. And then the employer would come in and say, or the hiring manager would come in and say, Anna, not even close. And that's when I learned that 99% of people don't actually know how to sell their experience. So they might
Mhm.
have all the skills and experience that the employer is looking for, but they don't know how to show that, oh, I'm actually really good at what I've done before. As you like to say, I'm a superstar at what I've done before. So they don't know how to show that. So they don't know how to talk about their results and their achievements and the
Mm.
impact they have had for their previous employer. And I think it comes both from not knowing that you need to do that because you kind of think, well, look at my resume. Like it's a perfect
Mm.
match. What else do you want from me?
Yeah.
A and B, I think it comes from this idea that it's bad to sell yourself, that you're bragging almost, and bragging is bad. But to that I always say, well, unless you tell them about it, there's no way they're going to know about all the amazing things that you've done with your previous employer and the superstar that you are. No one else is going to do the selling for you, so
Yeah.
you have to brag.
Yeah, especially as an immigrant, especially if you're in a foreign country, right? Like, I remember my first job search, and I only job searched once. So I got a job out of college 8 months before I graduated, and one of the things I knew was that I needed a visa. I had all these things stacked against me, and I must make an effort, go above and beyond, buy the nicest
Mhm.
suit, like show up, know my stories, study the company. Like I really had to put in the effort when everyone else was laughing at me. And I only share this because I know you're really, really passionate about it, and that was going to be our next segment in terms of like it's really hard to stand out as an immigrant. There are a lot of things against you when you're abroad. Um, I think all of this conversation is like 10 times more valuable for immigrants because there is also this time clock, right? So I work with a lot of H-1B candidates. So my question was going to be, Anna, like what would be your advice to those people? They have 60 days, 90 days. they're trying to push through, and they just see like there's just so much darkness when you're in that place, because I was also on
Mhm.
a visa. It's really stressful because you can't even like, I did not have furniture the first 3 years because I did not have H1B, and I was like, I don't know what they're gonna do to me, right? Like I really thought, and I'm telling you, this is real immigrant fear, right? I
Mhm.
really thought a helicopter is gonna land outside at DC. An immigration helicopter is gonna come outside and really pick me up and deport me, like the minute they find out that I will be out of status. And I think that's kind of how fearful we are of this whole immigrant situation. So, what would be your suggestion to somebody who's in that, and again, combined with no network, no family, no nothing? How can they find fun in job search?
Mhm. Mhm. Oh, I can relate to that so much. And it's so funny that you say about the helicopter. So for me, I don't know if other people living abroad can relate to that, but for me, for the longest time, I was so scared of getting a parking ticket or going through security at the airport.
Yeah.
I don't know why I had this fear of what if something's going to happen? What if, they take away my visa for whatever reason? That a parking ticket is somehow going to affect my work visa.
I still
And I
don't have
think
one because of that.
only oh, really? Okay. So I think for me, once I became a citizen, it took me good like 5 years to
Mm,
let go of the fear of a parking ticket
yeah.
and how that's going to affect the rest of my life, really. So I get it. I get how challenging it is and how dark it can get for you when you do have that deadline, and you do depend on you know sometimes actually bureaucracy and things going
Hmm.
through at the right time. And a lot of my clients actually live abroad as well. We have people from North America living in Europe and the other way around. So it is something that comes up with my clients a lot. And there are kind of a couple of things to talk about here. Number one, don't wait. And actually is applicable no matter where you are in the world, whether you do need a visa or you live in your home country. Don't wait until you're desperate. Don't wait until the clock is ticking and you have 2 months to go, 3 months to go. So the earlier you start, and the earlier, to be honest, the earlier you get help on this journey, the easier it's going to be. Because once you get to those, I have 2 months left, 3 months left, there is, and we'll talk about what you can do, but just mentally, it gets so much harder to get out of that mentality of, well, it's this or nothing, and it has to work. So I always say start early, start before you need it, start before you have a deadline, because it's a lot easier to job search when you don't have a deadline.
Hmm.
So that's the first piece that I always want to remind job seekers. Don't wait until the situation is there and desperate. Number one. Number two, the kind of the mindset piece with job search abroad. And that is something that really helped me, but it took me a few years living abroad to get there. So it was this idea that I am somehow less than everyone else because I was not born here. So all I wanted to do was blend in. I wanted to sound like everyone else. I wanted to have a last name that doesn't scream, hey, I am from a different part of the world, most
Hmm.
probably, because people make that assumption immediately when they, let's say, see my last name.
Hmm.
So all I wanted to do was blend in and try to come across as someone who is like everyone else. So I, let's say, wouldn't talk about things that I did outside of, I live in Canada, so I wouldn't talk about what I have done before. And that just never felt authentic. And it's really hard to stand out that way because, again, you're now competing against millions of people who have very similar background. And let's say we're born here. So a few years in, I just said, you know what? I'm going to make my biggest insecurity. So for me, that was my accent. I'm going to start selling it because no one else they're interviewing sounds like me. No one else they're interviewing has lived in 5 countries. So let me make this my story and let me make this my selling point. So I made this one of my 3 points that I would bring up in tell me about yourself. So in the very beginning of the interview, I would talk about living abroad, moving to multiple countries, and what that has taught me. And from the very beginning, I felt like, okay, now I'm addressing this biggest insecurity that I have from the get go. And if that's not something that resonates with them, that's totally fine, because then that's probably not the employer for me. But you'd be surprised how that pretty much, I don't think that has ever happened. I think employers were really impressed by that, and they really wanted to dig into it. And I would make this, again, my selling point, and I would talk about how this makes me a stronger candidate than someone else who doesn't have this experience, because I had to build a life abroad. I had to figure everything out by myself without an example of, let's say, my parents or my siblings of this is how you do things. I had to figure all of that out. And again, not just career related, but life related on my own. So I would talk about, being resilient and figuring things out on the go, and, building social and professional networks from scratch. So I would make that my selling point, and it just made me feel so much more confident in myself and how I present myself. And that really made me different from everyone else they were interviewing. And I truly believe that was the biggest kind of shift in my career when I reframed that for myself, that, hey, this is what makes me different. This is what makes me stronger than everyone else. I just wouldn't shut up about it. And I would make this my whole story. So that is kind of the second piece around around kind of mindset. Don't try to hide it, but rather make this your selling point.
Yeah.
And the third piece around actions. So what you can actually do if you have that deadline coming up. So the number one thing, and again, if you follow me, you probably have heard me talk about it. The number one thing is stop spending all of your time on endless applications, because you've tried that already. And you know that did not get you to your dream opportunity. So instead, I would split my time between, okay, let's narrow down my target companies, and let's spend half of my time just reaching out to people within those target companies to meet with them, so that you can build that relationship and you can ask for a referral. That will be the fastest way for you to get an interview. And then, because again, you're in a time crunch, I would also be looking at opportunities that are coming up online. But instead of applying, the number one thing that I tell my clients always, your first instinct is, who can I reach out to? This job is posted. Who can I reach out to? So hiring managers, recruiters, and I don't love reaching out to recruiters. We won't get into it why, but hiring managers and other people on the team who can introduce you to the hiring manager. Let's connect to anyone we can. And because you have this a bit of a time crunch and the job is posted, let's go wide so that we can get at least one person to respond to us. Let's get them on the phone, Zoom, in-person meeting, and again, try to get a referral. That's the number one thing that I would focus on if you needed a job in the next 90 days.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. I think that's something that, again, I feel like the first thing is definitely, like you said, reframing. I feel like all the things that we think are wrong about us, or sometimes maybe the people we're around have always called us out on it. It's not so much that they're bad. It's just that we've been surrounding ourselves with the wrong people, and those are our superpowers. It was the same thing for me with like talking. Like I was told all my life, stop talking, stop talking, stop talking, and I was like, and then suddenly I was like, wait a minute, somebody just paid me $1,000 to talk. I mean, this must be something really powerful. And I feel like it takes that external perspective. So like that's where maybe coaching also comes in, where you might be sitting in an echo chamber where everybody's just reaffirming your insecurities, but you step out of it, ask for advice, ask for mentorship, and then people like you and me could come in and tell you, hey, wait a minute, this is actually your superpower and not something to be ashamed of. That's kind of what we do in the program too all the time, is like, why are we going after your zone of incompetence? why do you want to work in that? Like, these skills will not make you successful. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And so we push people to figure out their zone of genius, which comes from the book called The Big Leap, which is a great concept and very similar to what you're saying. It's like we figured it out what it is and run with it. And for networking, what are your thoughts on? I've always told people if they are on a time crunch, definitely reach out, do a lot of networking, but be super honest. Be like, I really need a job. Like, I genuinely can use your help. I have X amount of days left. Could you be so kind? And in the future, I'll be happy to return the favor. And, sometimes even a voice note could help. And mostly when you're reaching out to people, if they're alumni, peers, people what if they relate to that struggle and they're like, oh my God, you know what? When I was going through this, somebody actually helped me. I'm going to help you back. So I feel like I just want to see what your thoughts are on being transparent and upfront that, I genuinely need this sooner than later. And I would appreciate you sort of jumping in and helping out. I've seen great results with it. I just wanted to see what your thoughts are on that.
I think it depends. I think
Mm.
it depends on who you're reaching out to. And I always tell my students that you kind of the absolutely cold reach out is your last resource, and start with, trying to get an introduction through someone that you know, and start looking for people you have anything in common with. And, alumni of the same university is an easy one, but maybe you didn't go to school here, so it's harder to find that. But let's say in this specific scenario, it can be someone who you're just seeing on their LinkedIn profile that they have moved abroad. So they would relate to that. So for someone like that, that can be, from my perspective, that can be an option to phrase it that way. I like to really push for a meeting first rather than kind of mentioning anything like that in your first message. So that is something that I learned in sales. So I come from a sales background, and the number one thing that I learned in actually recruitment sales. So my job, my six-figure job, was to find hiring managers, reach out to them, get them to talk to me, and then essentially get them to work with me, which is exactly what job seekers are trying to do when they're networking on LinkedIn, for example. So the number one thing that I learned from recruitment sales was get people to actually talk to you. Get people to talk to you in a meeting over Zoom. That's very different from, a short message on LinkedIn. It's really hard to get a feeling of who you are, and for that person to feel like, I like you. I just want to help you. So my number one advice for anyone is you need to meet with these people. So your number one thing is to get a meeting with them. And when there is a job posted, you can mention that in that reach out, that there is a job posted that you're interested in. So it's okay to mention that. But the meeting is not about you getting that job. The meeting is always to learn, because it feels to that person on the other side, it feels like, it just feels better than, hey, I just need your help, stranger, please help me. So I always say, ask them questions, make them feel good. And people, that's how people like you. I don't know if you've read How to Make Friends and Influence People,
Yeah.
by Dale
Many
Carnegie.
times.
I don't know if you remember, but in the very beginning,
Yeah.
I read that, I don't know, the first time I read it, I think it was in high school, and that example really stuck with me. So it's been a couple of decades since then, but it really stuck with me, where, he talks about an example of this girl who didn't have, the right clothes, and she always felt very, just, she didn't feel good when she would go to parties because all of her friends and other girls were dressed very nicely. And someone gave her this advice: just talk to people about them and they're going to love you because it just feels very good. And that's exactly what happened. And, and she had all of these suitors. Everyone was really into her, even though she was not, she didn't look the way everyone else looked. So give people this gift really of time where they get to talk about themselves. They get to share about themselves. And that's to me what networking is about.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
So I would always focus on let's get them
Call.
on the phone,
Mm.
let's get them in a
Yeah.
meeting. And that's when you can share. Like ask them a lot of
Yeah.
questions about them and, the what they do and the company and the team and the clients and the projects and the challenges. I can go on and on. So ask them a lot
Mm.
of questions, but it's okay to also mention that, what you're telling me about X resonates because I'm looking for an opportunity in X as well. And then ask them another question. And then it's okay towards the end to get a little bit more vulnerable and say, hey, this is my situation. I am looking for an opportunity in the next 90 days. If you were me, what would be the path forward that you would take?
Yeah. I love that. Yeah.
Because by
That,
that point, to me, by that point, they have a bit of a connection with you. And now
yes.
they start thinking, well, what can we do to help you get that opportunity in the next 90 days?
Mm, yes, I love that. And I think the only thing that stops people from doing that would be just the slow response rates, right? Like the percentage of people, and networking is a numbers game, right? Especially as immigrants, if we don't have a big network already, it's like you have to send so many messages to get one call. But it's the same thing like sales, right? Like we do so much outreach, we try to reach so many people, and then it's like a funnel, right? Like it's always going to be very little percentage which will actually get on call with you. And I feel like that's where people get disappointed. So yeah, so I'm sure your advice will be the same, but I always tell people is like just stick to it, like stick to it, and to your point, like get as many calls as you can or get as many conversations going, which is the same as we do in sales. Like it's the same concepts no matter what, because there's no bigger game of networking than sales. I think
Oh
you'll
my
agree.
goodness. This is another thing I learned in sales. You're, so frustrated with the outcome. You keep thinking, well, I'm not making any sales, i.e., I'm not landing in networking meetings. Well, okay, well, that's for you to have, at the bottom of the funnel, to have sales or to have networking
Offers,
meetings, you need to have what? Full top of the funnel.
right?
So, how much are you actually putting in at the top of the funnel?
Yeah.
So, that's the number one question that I ask when, let's say one of my students would say, I'm not working and it's not working. And not working is not working. Um, uh, and I would tell them, okay, well, how long have you been networking proactively? They would say 5 days. And then I would tell them, okay, well, how many people have you reached out? 3. Like, well, here's your answer. That's just
Exactly.
not enough time to see the results, because oftentimes you get a response from someone a couple of weeks later, a month later.
Yeah.
A and B, 3 people is just a very, very, very small sample
Small
size.
number. Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
always say that 10%, and that's what I'm seeing with my clients, 10% conversion rate. So out of the
Yeah.
10 people that you reach out to, 1 meeting is a really good kind of number to
Hit.
keep in mind. Again, it depends on a lot of factors. It
Yeah.
depends on your industry. So, for example, I have a client right now who is looking she's switching industries from consumer goods, and she wants to go into luxury and fashion. And it took her a few weeks of networking really hard to start landing meetings, because there are industry like the fashion industry where it's just
Click.
harder. It's just
Yeah,
harder
it's
to get
clicky
people to
too.
respond. Thank you.
Yeah.
So it depends on the industry, it depends on your starting point. So there are a lot of factors that go into it, but
Mm,
3 is just not enough
not enough.
realistically.
Yeah.
When you reach out to 33 and no one responds to you, okay, well, that's when let's start looking at, okay, is it your industry specifically that people are not active on LinkedIn?
Mm,
Is it your messaging? Is it that, okay, maybe they're not active on LinkedIn and we should try email instead? But 3 is just not enough.
yeah. And that's why I tell my clients whenever I get a message like, oh, networking's not working. And I'm like, can I see the tracker? Can I see who sent you the message? Can I see who you messaged? They're like, oh, we're updating it. I'm like, yeah, right. Like update and then we can have a chat, because usually you just didn't do it enough and you didn't track it enough, because it's the same thing. We track leads. If we don't track leads, we're not going to have sales. It's the same thing. You have to track this stuff, especially when you're actively looking, and then later you can start to switch as well. Is it okay if we take a question, Anna?
Yes,
And then we have a sales.
absolutely.
Okay, Mohammed says, is reaching out through LinkedIn considered networking? Yes, I would think so.
It's part of it. It's part of
Yeah.
it. But I want to be very clear here that just sending an empty connection request, or even sending a connection request with a note, or even, someone accepting the connection, or even, having a quick kind of conversation with a couple of messages on LinkedIn, that's not really networking, because you're not really meeting with them. You're not really building a connection with them. They don't
Mm.
really know anything about you. You don't really know anything about them. So that really is kind of the first little teeny tiny step in your networking process. But as we talked about earlier, the number one thing that you want to do is to actually get in front of them, to actually
Yes.
book a meeting and have a conversation. That's
Yeah.
networking.
Yeah. I love that. And LinkedIn is a great platform, because I know everybody in my life right now, probably 90% of people are through LinkedIn. And it's such a great platform. And but you're right, like it's not like you and I are exchanging empty messages, or like not, or being like besties and talking all the time. It's just something that you connect on common goals and common objectives and idea sharing, and it's a wholesome process for everybody. Like all parties enjoy it. I feel like that's what networking really is to me. And then there comes a point where you maybe have separate goals and you go your way. I always think of it like a train tracks, right? Like sometimes they go parallel, and then sometimes they just separate, and then they come back again. So I feel like people are just very confused between friendships and networking, and just getting to know people online. Like they're all different things. But to your point, unless you put yourself in front of someone, unless you know your story, unless you also have the ability to hear other people's story, you will not be able to make a connection. And that connection is the only way to grow and get more opportunities, especially if
Mhm.
you are just starting out your network,
Mhm.
and you're abroad where nobody knows you just yet. So I love that, Anna. Those were such great points. I did
One
want to ask.
thought I want to offer
Good.
here is this. I think we hear a lot that networking is, you're helping them and they're helping you, that it's kind of a two-way street. And I think here's where a lot of job seekers get stuck. So a lot of people are thinking, well, I
Oh
only
yeah.
have
Yeah.
6 years of experience. And why would this executive at this big company meet with me? Because sure, there's things that I can learn from them, but why would they meet with them? There's not much that I can offer them. So I think this comes up for a lot of people. And the way I like to think about it is, number one, they're meeting with you for a reason. They're saying yes for a reason, because they can, for example, easily find a new hire without having to do anything, without having to post a job, going through the interview process. Someone reached out to them, they go for a coffee with them, and they found a new hire for the team. So they always have that in mind. Number two, someone has probably helped them at some point in their career, so they know what it feels like, and they know that, okay, well, at some point you will get into, let's say, this company or this industry, and you can be a great contact to have in the future. So there's that, the number two. And number three, I just lost my train of thought here. There's number three, but I just lost it. It will come back to me.
It's okay. But those are great points, because yes, people are like, what do I have to give? And I think networking is
Oh,
a
sorry. I just
no-no.
remembered. I remembered what was number three.
Go
Um,
ahead.
when you think about offering something to someone, it
Mm.
doesn't have to be work related. It doesn't have to be referral related, or, hey, I can introduce them to their next client. It can be, especially with someone very senior, it can be as simple as a new restaurant recommendation. It can be, a book recommendation, a podcast recommendation that you mentioned to them during that meeting.
Mm,
And by the way, even if they have already read it or heard it, it's totally okay. So don't get stuck in that
mm,
with that idea. But helping can look like that. It doesn't have to be work related.
yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. And I think that's a big point where people are hesitant. They're like, oh, I can't ask because if I ask, then suddenly like the scales have gotten imbalanced or whatever. But there's again, like you said, companies spend a lot of money finding talent, like a lot. So you sending a message and asking for a meeting and potentially getting hired is in their best interest. They're gonna save hundreds of thousands of dollars than what you will gain in return. So there's always that win-win. And I like that book, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, and this mindset of like win-win. So how do we make it win-win? And if you are confused, one of the best questions I ask sometimes is like, how can we make it a win-win? You tell me. I know my win, but I can't assume your win. What would your win look like? So, like then you can collaborate towards it. Like, you help me with this interview prep, but how can we make this win-win? You tell me.
Mhm.
And I feel like those are some great, great points. So there's so many questions on the list, Anna, that we didn't go down, but I love having a great conversation with
I
you.
know.
I think we touched on every single thing and more. Now tell our audiences, how can they find you? How can they work with you? And when can they join your program?
All right. Well, my bread and butter, my baby, is my job search coaching program, the Star Candidate, where I teach you how to get clarity on what your dream role is and how to land it without the burnout, without endless applications. So that's where we work together very, very closely. And you can always start with my podcast, the Career Diet Podcast. I dive deep into all things career and job search, from networking and mindsets to interviews. So definitely tune in there and follow me on Instagram under the Career Diet, or on LinkedIn under my full name, Anna Belyaeva, or you can always type the Career Diet and you will find me there.
I love it. I love it. Excellent. Thank you so much, Anna, for your time. I always ask my guests one last question, and that is, what's your favorite book?
Ooh, this is such a good question. Um, um, a book that I have read and went back to probably 3 times in the last decade is called Never Eat Alone by Kif
Mm,
Farazi. So we talked a lot about networking, and that's what the book is about, but he makes it very fun and
mm,
different and doable. And actually, I think that's where in the very beginning of my career, I really got inspired. It's a very easy read. You'll finish it in a couple of days, but it's very inspiring, and it kind of shows you what people are doing. People are, executive level, what they're doing, what we don't actually see they do, and how they think of their network. And again, it's not transactional. It feels very authentic and natural. And even if you implement, one of the things that he talks about in the book that he does, you already will make such a big step forward with your network. So I recommend it to all of my students. Again, one of the books that I kept going back to, because again, it always would re-inspire me to look at networking differently, or restart networking, or pick up my efforts. So highly recommend.
I love it. Excellent. Thank you so much, Anna, for your time and for all this amazing knowledge that you've opened your heart and just shared it with all transparency. I just can't wait to see the sweatshirts that say job search should be fun. Let me know when you're launching them. I'll be the first in the line.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I love that. Well, thank you so much for having me. I always enjoy our conversations.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much, everyone. And we'll see you again with another episode of the Prashha Dutra Show.